My name is Ray Cool. I want to welcome guests who've joined for today's webinar, Cybersecurity, discussing best tools for effective defense. We've done a lot of research over a long period of time on this topic and want to share a summary of what we've come up with. I want to thank many of you who are long-term clients and friends who are joining us today. Some of you have not been exposed in the past to PBSI, so hope this information is informative and helpful. Goals, we want to talk about particularly some of the tools that are important to have in place today. If you've been in attendance at previous security webinars we've done, we try to focus on the same common themes, but in detail focus in specific areas to drill into, so exactly how does this work. So in general, the problem we're seeing, it's not just ransomware, we're using this term, but malware of all nature, proliferating more and more. I read, you may get emails that use the terms epidemic and just any what sound like scare-tastic terms in terms of the rate of increase of attacks, particularly of ransomware attacks, and we see it in our own client base. It's a very difficult problem, and it's very dangerous. We'll talk about why. We'll talk about the essentials and drill into the details of some of the best practices for securing. Again, we'll discuss, as we have in the past, but we'll be briefer today, how do we spot bad emails? So each of you will get an attachment, or I should say a link, to information about this at the end of webinar, so you'll have something to use for your own internal training if you wish. It's content created by PBSI. And we'll do a demonstration of some of the important tools that can be put in place. And the good news is many of the tools are very cost effective. So it's not a matter of do you have a lot of money to spend, it's what tools do you really need to have in place. So glad you've joined. So for those of you who know PBSI, there's not really a lot I can say because many of you have been with us for 10 or 20 plus years, and I want to thank you for long-term relationships. We try every day to help clients to the best of our ability with technical expertise and a human touch. For those of you who have not experienced PBSI, we have large number of staff who have been long term, so 27 of our staff have been with us for 10 plus years. And I know that knowledge helps clients. We've developed a lot of expertise, particularly in security, over a lot of years. So it's from that base that we share information. So for most of you, you're attending this security webinar because you know the internet's a dangerous place and becoming more dangerous, where it used to be, I don't really know why somebody would want anything from my organization. Today, we're aware that there are some very dollarizable, if that's a word, values with either patient information or social security numbers, credit card numbers. Thieves have learned how to dollarize their bad behavior. So ransomware is the most blossoming category, unfortunately. Description: malware is usually delivered by clicking on an email or opening an attachment in a disguised email. So these are the things where you put all the defenses in place. At the end of the day, there is no defense against an employee who makes a click in the wrong place. So employee education is central. So a lot of the things we're going to talk about are to keep things away from the employee's view, and if an employee makes a mistake, to make sure we're protected. So there are policies and there are tools. We'll talk about all of that at least briefly. So once malware takes effect, it can be a short-term or long-term. So this is really difficult. So if it's a short-term, once we make that click, the file's in our C drive. Sometimes it's the entire C drive. Sometimes it's selective. The different ransomware products behave differently. But files are encrypted. As quickly as it can, it begins searching every drive I'm connected to, including cloud drives, and encrypting files on all shared drives. So there are some specific security procedures to put in place, but one of the things here that is should be front and center for every employee is, if you see a ransom message on your screen, turn your PC off immediately, unplug, because the quicker you respond, the more quickly you can reduce the electronic damage being done immediately. Unfortunately, now some of the tools in place are not taking immediate action. They're going and taking their time throughout a period of hours, days, weeks, collecting information, finding out what they can find, removing things from your network, and then performing their ransom activity. So very difficult problems out there. And the bottom line to ransomware is you're requested to pay a ransom in order to unlock your files. Sometimes that results in recovery, sometimes it doesn't. So difficult problem. Pretty much we understand that already. So what are the defense strategies? If the concept is protect, identify, and recover, so how do those fall into tools? So traditional security measures are all important. They're pretty well understood at this point in time. Have something on the exterior, a firewall and or an intrusion prevention device that protects your network from, keeps everything out of our doors. Having antivirus at that level and also on PCs within the facility and within our organizations, extremely important. Having patches auto-updated, extremely important, and having an approach with multiple layers, because if one layer fails, you want that not to be the end of the day. So employee education is critical to this because employees can break the best security practices. And then what tools are available for protection and recovery? So we're going to talk about these in some detail. I will go quickly, so I'll apologize for speaking quickly, but we want to make sure we're finished by 1 o'clock, and we will be, and a lot of topics to cover. So the categories of prevent, detect, and recover. So prevention, it's a misnomer. There is no antivirus, there is no firewall on earth that can prevent an employee clicking on a bad link resulting in damage. So prevent simply means prevent as much as possible from entering in the organization and never exposing itself to an employee at their desk. And things have gotten much more effective, but those, at least at this point, they are not perfect, and I'm not sure that they'll ever be perfect. But exterior and interior security protection first. Not only have a firewall, but have it set up correctly. It's not expensive to set up a firewall correctly. It just requires a bit of knowledge. So it must be silent, which is a setup so that it doesn't respond to pings, so that people don't know what rev of operating system. Redirecting and trying to play the same game in reverse that the hackers play. They look for certain ports on which they expect telnet or other services running, and we want to rearrange those. Again, this is simple to do. It's just really important. Then we want to have software. A very inexpensive firewall might not have this ability, but today most capable firewalls have the ability to do antivirus and intrusion prevention and have that customized software-wise at the firewall level. The firewall is actually a computer running software set up to permit certain things and block certain things. So we want to prevent things from coming into the building. So newer technology firewalls, this is really important. So we have clients in the field where we put a firewall in place there 10 years ago. So feeling like that's adequate protection may not really be relevant. Of course, it's better than having no firewall, but the newer firewalls do deeper packet inspection, including into encrypted portions of messages that formerly were just left alone. And increasingly, firewalls, security vendors are collaborating, and there's real-time sharing going on among security resources, so that as something is exposed to the firewall, it's already aware from online databases that something was reported that looked like this in a different country or a different city that seems like the same thing in a relatively real time. So the ability to respond to hacker morphing of their attacks really depends on use of some of the newer technology that just wasn't available 10 years ago. So if you have questions about your firewall and you're a PBSI client, feel free to contact us. We're happy to share the details of your current protection. So wireless controls, again, really important. Everybody understands you have to ensure encryption of your internal wireless, and that password control is important. So I won't delve into this deeply today, but I will say that the latest versions of encryption are really important. So there are de-encrypt programs out there that high school kids can have access to that can decrypt a simple password using an initial level of encryption in 10, 15 minutes or less. So take that to the latest high-level SSL encryption, and that same process might not run in days. So basically, encrypted is protected so long as it's current good. So this is an issue to understand that encryption isn't all the same. Okay, so these controls, they're basic. They're pretty much what we all have been putting in place for some time now. Employee education, I can't say enough. every employee at every desktop is a risk. And we see it all the time. PBSI I consider to be highly aware. We do lots of communication among employees, and we have fairly infrequent situations where an employee makes a mistake and clicks on something, but the emails we're all receiving are very carefully and cleverly worded. I'm going to show you an example of something that came at PBSI yesterday. So the employee was fortunately astute enough to say, well, wait a minute, this wasn't another employee, but spoofing among employees, and particularly to your CEO or from your CEO, it's increasingly popular, and you think, how could the hackers be that smart? And I'm not going to try and answer that question. Regular communications among staff, including something PBSI started doing, is reselling a service where we can send phishing emails intentionally trying to fool employees in your organization to see who responds without any malware response, but at least we've understood, okay, here's an educational opportunity. We're not trying to fire people. We're not trying to find out who's, quote, dumb. We're trying to educate all of us that these are the kinds of things that are going on. So employee education. Okay, desktop endpoint security. Long-standing, this has been a part of PBSI services for a long time, what we call online antivirus and monitoring, where you must ensure that you have antivirus on all your PCs, that it's up to date, and that all your apps and browsers are up to date. So the real-time situation where a security product is, or security patch has been released by Microsoft for Windows 10 or from Adobe for an old version of the reader, whatever the security patch is, at that point in time, hackers worldwide are alerted, oh, there was a security problem. What did they do? Oh, I see. Well, maybe we can take advantage of this and exploit it. So as soon as they can figure that out, they're sending an exploit out to take advantage of that within hours or days. So if you have updated your apps within a week, then you might be at risk for 6 out of those days. It's a game, but it's really important. Patch management is a big part of this. So you have to have antivirus and you have to have your patches updated. So this is something that's really easy to take care of. PBSI easily can monitor this and make sure this is happening on all of your PCs very easily. And this isn't a webinar about selling PBSI services. This is general content for anyone who wants to know, how can I become more secure? So the fact that we offer solutions, great. If you have an existing IT or existing solutions, great. We're talking about principles today. So online monitoring, so this is a part of detection. So we want to have antivirus software that is detecting issues if they do occur and mitigating or quarantining. We want to have some kind of monitoring take place, and this is where a lot of organizations fall down. We don't really know what's going on at the desktop at our front desk or no matter where in our organization until they complain. My PC's running slowly. Well, they think it's old. No, maybe it's a piece of malware that's running, collecting information. Who knows what it is? So having a monitoring process where alerts are coming to a central location and somebody who's paying attention are looking for, oops, there's a virus that just popped up at a certain PC in Northern Kentucky, blah, blah, and we need to contact them and tell them action needs to be taken and somebody's on it, instead of 3 days later when the end user at that PC has been getting the same message and rebooting for 4 days in a row, they say, I think maybe I ought to talk to somebody about this. So online monitoring is really important, increasingly important in terms of being aware and taking quick action. So the newest offering in PBSI set is a breach intelligence scanning offering, which again is very cost effective. And what it does is it scans every node on your network, every PC, every server, and it identifies all unencrypted data. So security numbers, which is dollarizable, health information, credit card information, PCI compliance information, and this allows you to identify in advance if you were hacked, what would a hacker find, and protect that information so that you're basically saying, I want to, if I am attacked and I do have an employee who does the wrong thing, that we don't put at risk really sensitive and valuable information. So another component of detecting. So finally, we want to make sure we can recover. To many of us, this may be the single most important. We've had some cases among our client base where they didn't have the right protection, or maybe they did have the right protection in place, but one of their employees made a mistake, clicked on a ransomware, and had some encryption issues where some of it was recoverable, some of it wasn't. The fact is, all of it could have been recoverable if they and we had the right backup solutions in place, and we'll talk about how you can create a backup where you know it's fail-safe and you know it's recoverable, so that quote bad event you know is not going to put you out of business. So we'll look at that. And I'm going to go quickly. This slide, we've covered this information in the past, and it's really important. We're going to pass out a handout that's actually an expansion of this slide, but the things that an employee needs to be trained won't be our focus today, but they need to be a focus for all of us. No unapproved downloads, especially screensavers, among the worst. No clicking on web links, no clicking on attachments, particularly in both cases, understanding an unsolicited email. Unsolicited doesn't mean you don't know the person, it means you're not expecting this email. So if you send me an email asking for answer to a question and I respond back to you, that's not unsolicited. Or if you know you're going to get a webinar invitation from PBSI, that may be unsolicited, but it's not unexpected. But when you get an email from another employee where you know the person, but it's totally out of context, and why would this person be sending me this email, that's unsolicited. So when something unsolicited, then our ears need to be open up in a whole number of ways, and we'll have some more detail about this. So we want to secure our workspace, make sure we don't leave our passwords sitting around. I'm sure you know this is so commonly violated, even though it's so understood, because remembering passwords is so difficult today. So you just have to find a different solution. And one of my favorites, if your PC is running slowly, don't just assume it's old, ask for a review. If you're a PBSI client, you can email us or call us anytime and say, look at this PC, we can do it online, check it out and see what is going on that's causing it to be running slowly, because generally speaking, a PC doesn't get slower just because it gets older. If it's slower than it used to be, there may be issues, but it's likely to be it's the software that's running on there that's accumulated over time, most of which is unnecessary and undesirable. So end users can help us help you by understanding, ask for help if your employee is running slowly. So there are employee policies that need to be communicated and behaved to, and then external communication, particularly if you're a healthcare organization, really any of us, need to know that emails are not secure unless we've made specific provision to secure them. We cannot send content, attachments, nothing in an email that includes PHI or social security numbers or credit card information unless it's specifically encrypted. And we have to be very careful about web storage devices, because ransomware links to connected drives, and that can easily include cloud drives. It's not secure just because it's in the cloud if you have a created login and password that goes there without interruption. And social media, employees need to know no protected information on our iPhone or so Android. These are basics, and we'll go into a bit more detail, but I want to talk about the tools specifically in today's webinar and how they work and why they're important. So employees need to know how to behave, understanding solicited email, understanding how to view an email. Are there misspellings, grammar mistakes, unusual framing, phrasing, colors, formatting, font variations? These are the things that will frequently pass our attention unless we're specifically looking for them. But those little things are the areas where an undereducated or possibly non-U.S. citizen hacker might make mistakes with. So the most common things we see, all the times new topics are popping up in terms of email content, where we'll get emails from other security organizations saying, here's a new one, here's a new one. So a Tesla release or a new Apple product release or something like the Olympics or a disaster that's going on or a holiday that's occurring, the recent celebrity breakup. These are all topics where if you're a scammer, you're thinking, okay, people are going to be curious about this, so let's make somebody curious to think we have something new to offer. Social media is a dangerous place. Just because your friends are your friends doesn't mean they're security smart. And just because they send you something they thought was interesting doesn't mean you should click on it. These can be a really common source. So just be very careful. And something that seems too good to be true, a dollar PC or such, just antenna up, particularly with incoming unsolicited emails, antenna up. links, really carefully think, should I click? Hover over the link, see if the link is actually who it purports to be. So a link can say this is mx.com, but if you look at the link, it might be mx.us.net.mymx.com or something, so it's actually not the source that you think it is. So all kinds of recent spoofs. IRS needs your PIN number to make sure that you're secure. Your Apple account or your Google account needs renewal. Here's a resume, long-standing but still commonly used. Lots of Word attachments that come in just for me on a topic about my shipment that's been delayed, or things that can easily be guessed for some percentage of the population. Social Security recently set up your account online before a hacker sets it up for you. Some of folks who've participated in Go Pokemon know that there was a Trojanized version that was available through authorized sources. Gmail alerts, your unusual activity has been detected. Basically, one thing about texts, if you receive a text and you haven't solicited something or you're not familiar with that vendor, don't respond. You will not get a text for an account renewal or an account update unless you have requested it. So incoming text, just be cautious. And fake Wi-Fi, Google, Starbucks, or at the RNC recently, was it 1,000 people, I think I read, that were scammed who logged on to Trump Wi-Fi that was actually stealing information. So it's dangerous out there. Some principles to consider. So that's training employees. On your screen right now, you see an example of something that happened yesterday. So Dane, who's our security administrator internally, sent out this email to all employees, watch out. And I added for a webinar example. And he describes this. He copied and sent to everybody this information. And Dane's comment was, this is a screenshot of an email received by Kathy, our employee, purportedly sent by Janet, our employee. It didn't come from Janet. And fortunately, Kathy was astute enough to forward it to Dane and say, is this real? But this example, hello, I thought you might appreciate this, is exactly the kind of generic message that a scammer would use, and you get something this generic. Regardless of somebody who usually sends you tidbits of helpful things or not, be very careful. This turned out to be a bad email, but it came in looking like it was from our employee, and this kind of thing happens. We've seen examples among our client base of CEO spear phishing where you think, how did the hacker know to send an email to the controller from the CEO's iPhone saying, I'm out of the office and I'll give you details when I get back, but please make this wire transfer for $6,000. Some things you think, shake your head and can't understand how somebody could be that bad or that smart, but it's happening. So careful, careful. All right, so now we're going to demonstrate a couple of these tools. Online security monitoring, what does it look like to have somebody being watching on your behalf to know that things are secure? Then we're going to look at this data breach intelligence tool, which we found very effective in scanning and finding unprotected data on a network. And then we're going to look at the specific characteristics of online backup. Not all online backup is the same. So there are newer technologies that really make a difference here. So I'm going to go now and demonstrate. So we're going to go to, here's an example, by the way. We have among our listening audience today a security officer who's formerly FBI, and the FBI very helpfully publishes, so here on September 16th, this is just an example where ransomware victims are urged to report, and some really helpful, well described information that talks about what is ransomware and how can you defend, and it's like we're singing to the same choir. So that's not my demonstration. I just wanted to give a shout out to the FBI, and there are many other security organizations who publish helpful things. We read all that we can. What I want to do is go to online monitoring. So right now I'm looking at the monitoring dashboard where all of our clients on the left-hand side, I might pick a certain client. Unless I had made a selection, the first thing a technician at PBSI who's monitoring this dashboard, and we always have a couple of people who have this logged in and they're looking at these things, looking at, for all clients, servers or workstations or mobile devices, assessing what's at issue out there. So I've selected just PBSI, so these are all servers at PBSI. So once I select a client, again, I'm acting like I'm a PBSI technician, which I'm not. And on the north pane, each tracked device is listed. So I could click on this server, or I could click on this server. And when I click on the server, down beneath are the characteristics. I'm going to call that the south pane that are being tracked. So once a monitoring is set up, I can set it up to be with hundreds of different checks. There's a standard set of checks that are made. So in this case, it's tracking performance or their disk problems or the physical problems. It's tracking virus issues or task scheduling issues. If it was a PC, it could be tracking whether QuickBooks is running successfully, disks are okay on this PC, and so forth. So there's one thing I'm going to point out here because I noticed this earlier today and I want to point it out. So 12 failed logins. Generally, that's not a real high number. A failed login, you're going to see in a second, what are the failed logins that were noticed? So there were 12 failed logins noticed from 3 different sources, and a couple of them are IP addresses, and the usernames used were, this is an employee who tried and failed twice, okay? And here is administrator. That's a common generic login, and my guess is, I haven't talked to one of our technicians, my guess is this was a login attempt from someone outside, so we can see where they came from. But the point is that this server was subject to some failed logins. So we expect to see 1 or 2 where somebody just forgets their password. But when we see one, this isn't a bad example, we see sometimes a server, all of a sudden it'll show up and have 2,219 failed logins from 56 different email attempted logins, which will be admin, administrator, me, just things that you might are common guesses. And when we see that, there's an attack underway where there's been something under the surface. Generally, a server shouldn't be exposed to be able to be seen by a hacker. So it's the kind of thing, the reason that's on the top of this list is because it's the most important thing at the top of this list. At the top of the server list would be the server that's most problematic. If I went to all clients, then all servers at all clients, the most important thing that's presumed to be wrong would be at the top of the list. So one other quick thing about servers, you can see not only things that are behaving well or not well on a server, but if this is a server connected to your internet, which this one is, you can see issues. So many times we find clients where the, let me click here on a performance monitor, and this report where the system seems to be running, quote, slowly. So what's the issue? It could be that the server's running slowly, or it could be that the bandwidth is compromised. So received bandwidth, the left-hand side here is the last 24 hours, the right-hand side is the last 8 days. So we can see some occurrences here where compared to expected bandwidth use, that's been exceeded on the receiving side. So this might be Microsoft patches. We wonder, does this make sense? Is there any reason why on Tuesday at this time that we'd have some excess use? And on the outgoing side, one spike here was there a large file transferred. So this is basically identifying the ability of a technician to drill in from a specific problem that's been identified to what else can we learn about it over time. So this online access, basically who has time and energy to attend to each of their devices to ask what's going right, what's going wrong. And that's basically the value of this monitoring service. So at the workstation level, I'm going to do just a little with this. I'm going to identify on my tablet PC, this is my Surface that I've selected here, and down here I'm looking at the antivirus on my Surface, and you're seeing some virus things that happened that are categorized as detected. So the general categories are it's been deleted, it's been quarantined, and if it's active, it'd be right at the top of the list. But here on August 1st, this was detected. So it's actually been detected since. Well, what is that really? That is in my email, in my Outlook, in my email, I keep intentionally some things that came from bad sources to demonstrate. Here's what a bad email looks like. Well, these were never clicked on. They aren't active, but this determines that in that email, there's something that if it were clicked would be bad. So something was detected. It's not really active. It hadn't been quarantined. So generally speaking, you don't want to see anything like this, but there's a reason why I keep mine around. So on a PC, we know what's going on in terms of virus activity. I'm going to go to a different PC. My wife is our HR coordinator at PBSI. I'm going to pick on her. So on her PC, we're going to see the status of patches. So here's a case where there's one missing patch. Frankly, when we look at PCs out in the field that aren't covered under active patch management, there might be dozens or hundreds of missing patches where they're just security holes waiting to be dealt with. So this one out of all these have been installed is not much, but what a security administrator, if they see this, can do is simply say approve that, and the normal schedule for all units at PBSI is every day at 1 a.m. So that one will automatically be dealt with. It would have happened automatically anyway when the next scan was run, but this is what a viewer can do. Okay, so monitoring lets every problem rise to the top, so it can be seen and dealt with. So basically, have somebody operating on your behalf, and depending on how you have this set, including antivirus, you're paying $4 a month or $6 a month in total for the antivirus, the monitoring service. It's much, much less expensive than most other folks who offer this service do. So, okay, moving on from monitoring, we're going to talk about scan protection. So breach intelligence scanning. So this is a product that uses patented technology. High-level vendor in this area was acquired by the monitoring company where we use their products called LogicNow. So this is now a LogicNow product and is available to every PBSI client. The way this works is that we set it to go out and scan for unprotected data, and here are devices. So on our dashboard, we see that we have one device out there somewhere in the field where there are 335 incidents of unprotected data that there's an algorithm inside of the software that values those at $67,000, where you go down the line here and you find here's a PC somewhere that has 25 incidents worth $5,000. Well, the one I'm going to pick on is our human resource PC. And the first time we ran this scan, it found a whole bunch of stuff that we were surprised was there, and it's been cleaned up. But we've left some things on there for a demonstration, so I want to show you what happens. We can look at previous scans, but I'm going to view the most recent scan done on this PC, and it says there's $14,000 worth of data there, and they appear to be mostly Social Security numbers. There's a date of birth, there's a driver's license. I'd like to know what that is. So once a scan is run, then the detail is shown, and here's the value. So I would never have known to go and look on this PC in an Outlook archived PST file from an email from some years ago that there was an attachment in this email that had some data in it, but now it found it for me, so I can drill in and look. It was in the sent mail folder. It was this claim, when actually it turned out that there was a trailer affidavit in that email, and it wasn't really a driver's license number, but it was in a document where this would actually be the beginning and the end of that number. So there isn't really a valid driver's license there, but the column title, whatever it was, made the scan find this, but we know where the file is, we know the email is, and the archive, and it can be deleted right now. So there's another here, just one more example, where I put a file on this PC that says test file. That's really the name of this file, and it found, I simply made an Excel sheet with a list of Social Security numbers, but in this case, they start with ones and end with ones. These are bogus numbers, but they're formatted like Social Security numbers. They look like Social Security numbers, and the scan found them. So we know exactly that in the documents area on this PC, we can go delete that or encrypt it. So some of you heard me tell this story in the past, but the first time we ran this scan on our office manager's PC, and we have a policy at PBSI, we do not store credit card numbers electronically, period. We write them down, put them in a locked file cabinet. So the scan first run on our office manager's PC found a file that appeared to be a list of Social Security numbers, or excuse me, credit card numbers. And I thought, no, that can't be true. So I went and talked to her and said, you don't really have this file. She said, oh, are we not supposed to do that? So this is a good person, a smart person, but it shouldn't have been there. So we encrypted the file and eventually deleted it. But it's an example where we think everybody is aware at the same level that we're aware, and it's just not the case. if we have compromisable data and we were hacked, and that hack took a while, it didn't start encrypting things now, it looked around and spent a few days and then started encrypting things, what would it have stolen? What is available on our network that's not encrypted? That's what this scan will find. It will tell us exactly where to go to find what is sensitive and tell us, delete these files. So the follow-up action is quite straightforward if you know how to follow this bouncing ball and know where to find that and know what to delete. Okay, so data breach scanning, and at a larger level, we can see all the devices. We know how many incidents on the things we're monitoring have credit card issues, have unprotected Social Security numbers, how many have Visa card numbers, MasterCard numbers, and so forth. So this is something where this isn't just something PBSI monitors on your behalf. If you have this service in place, you can also log in anytime and see the things that are here in its current status. And once it's set up, you're paying $3 a device per month for this to happen, so it's not a terribly expensive thing. Okay, so we've talked about monitoring. We've talked about scanning to identify unprotected data. The last topic, I'm going to talk about online backup and how new technology interacts here. First of all, I'm on a screen right now for one PC where we have online backup set up. And for demonstration purposes, we turned this PC off for some days in a row here, but I'm looking at the prior month. So the green lines here tell me backup was completed successfully. So my graphic monitoring board here says backup successful on each of these days where there's a green line. I would have seen an orange line if there was an error, if there was a file open when backup. I would see a red line where it attempted and was unsuccessful. And no backup simply says no backup was done. So this PC was turned off on these days and no backup was done. So we turned it back on, and it backed up yesterday. And here are the things that it backed up, and it took that amount of time. So when I hover over it, tells me how much time it took. Back on the 3rd of the month, it took, for the two folders backed up, it took 2 minutes and 5 minutes. On the 9th of the month, it took the same amount of time. But there would be different days where the duration, if you see the duration column, will be longer or shorter because it's only backing up what changed that day. So some really key things. This is a double backup. So there's a acronym for this, but basically it is, instead of a on-site backup only, and instead of a cloud backup only, it is a combination of on-site and cloud backup. So what happens with this backup software is we create usually an external hard drive or an external USB drive that's large enough where the backup, once it's defined, goes to that external device and it's encrypted at a high level. So for most ransomware, that on-site backup is encrypted and inaccessible to the ransomware, but as soon as it gets done with that on-site backup, it then goes and does a cloud backup from the removable device. So what's important is that it's a hybrid. It's both on-site and it's online. What I'm looking at on this screen is the online backup because it has the history. It knows the last 30 days of every single backup, and it knows if we've had this in place for, let's say, 2 years and we've only changed a file twice, it would have every iteration because it stores at least the last 3 versions of every file. So if you have a policies and procedures document that you change every 3 months, you know you've at least got the last 3 copies. And you can go to any day and grab a file from that day. So there are things we do to define the backup, there are things we do to define the restore, and there are things that we set up for preferences. So I won't take long here, but identifying the fact that we can do things to create limitations of bandwidth. So I don't want it to take all my bandwidth when it's backing up in the middle of the night even, so I can limit it during a certain time of day to use a certain percentage of or a certain amount of my bandwidth. Here's where I define the local removable drive. It doesn't have to be removable. The local drive where the backup goes, that's the local portion. And then there are other things you can identify. So you set which things do you want to back up. You can back up the entire device or, of course, any folders. And then once I have this identified, I can look at previous dates as of this date and time. I can go out and and I'm not really going to go any far into this, but you can see, I can see whatever's on this device in either direction move these files. So you have the backup that is redundant, that's separated from your data. This online backup is completely inaccessible to any ransomware. So once you know that yesterday's backup was complete, you know for a fact anything that happens today is beyond access to the hacker, and it's automatic. And if a backup fails, a dashboard gets an alert immediately that the backup failed. It was supposed to run at 3 a.m. We get an alert at 3 a.m. Now, nobody's paying attention to it at 3 a.m., but we do have some things that do send a text to highest level of our tech staff. And for obvious reasons, during the night, we don't set many of those to make an alert. So the idea of having your data protected, this would be your worst case backup. If you, in fact, have the employee who makes the wrong click and you now have ransomware, you want to make sure. And you can do test restores, which is also very important from any one of these days. So that's another important component of online backup, is verifying and testing. So I'm going to return back to PowerPoint. We're finished with content. I'm just going to summarize. So the risk intelligence scanning, it will identify HIPAA compliance issues. It can identify PCI compliance issues. It's cost effective. It's done online. You have access to it. Backup, encrypted, redundant, alerts, and certified disaster recovery. So some of the tools, whether you use the tools PBSI provides or a different set of tools, some of these are really essential elements. If you don't have an online backup and a hybrid backup that you're comfortable with, that you know works, I'd encourage you to explore something different. So if you're a PBSI client and you wonder if this is in place for you, contact us. We're happy to help. And I want to thank you for your participation today. We're finished with content, and I want to thank you for your